What's up, everybody? It is Jordan here from Wednesday Night Warhammer. This week's video is going to be a little bit of a shorter one, but we're just taking a second to celebrate the successes of our dear friend, the Psychophage. Psychophage has an incredible glow up recently, has turned from kind of a unit you look at weirdly to just an incredible monster to take onto the battlefield, really support your army, and just have a great time with the Psychophage. So in this video, I'm going to talk about those changes that have been made through the balanced data slate for this unit, and I'm going to talk about my thoughts on how we should be using him now in the competitive aspect of Warhammer 40k. Okay, so some things stay the same, of course, for the Psychophage. He's still toughness 9, he's still 10 wounds with 3 up save and a 5 up feel no pain. That's pretty tanky, that's pretty good. And before, that's kind of all he could do, was he was just kind of good on staying on the point. Still doesn't have an invulnerable save, which that is a part where he's lacking. But here are the changes, and these are the changes I'm excited about. First up, I'm maybe not excited about this. He lost his 6+ feel no pain aura with anything within 6 inches of it. That's fine. You know, I'm not super excited about a 6-up feel no pain for multiple reasons. You know, there's a lot of multiple damage around in the game right now, so like if you make one feel no pain but fail the other, then your Termargon is still going to die. So it's not the best. The things that I am very, very excited about is I feel like they really tried to make him just more consistent. His melee attacks used to be D6+1, which was incredibly swingy. Now it's just a flat 6. That's phenomenal. 6 attacks. He's hitting on 3s, strength 6, AP 2, and 2 damage. He still has his anti-psyker 4 up, and he still has devastating wounds. So he's really good at eating Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns just had a codex coming out. You know, maybe Psychophage takes the forefront. I don't know. But the spiciest, in a literal sense and in a game sense, the spiciest rule change is his flamer. Once he shoots something, anything from your army that activates into that specific unit in combat gets an additional pip of AP into that unit. That is phenomenal. I'm going to talk about more in depth, but Tyranids need a little bit of help sometimes. The AP area and the Psychophage being able to just trundle around and give that is just really, really phenomenal. But last but certainly not least, he just gained 4 inches of movement. He went from moving 8 inches to moving up all the way to 12 inches. This guy's fast. He's pretty cool. Now, why are these changes specifically impactful, and why do I think that he slots into quite a bit of list now? It's for a couple of reasons. Taking the dice out of a dice game, meaning just having a static number, meaning the 6 attacks on the Psychophage, really, really ramps up the efficiency and the effectiveness of this unit. The number of times that you just roll a 1 and your Psychophage only has 2 attacks is really kind of terrible, because it can happen. I would much rather have just a flat 6 attacks than the potential of having 7 attacks. It's just always going to be better for just flat 6. Tyranids, they traditionally have low AP across the board. And being able to get to that a special breaking point of 2 AP, at least that's where I feel like a lot of units want to be activating, just because of the number of factions that have access to an Armor of Contempt stratagem, having AP that no matter what is actually going to be, you know, armor penetration and affecting your opponent's armor save is really, really beneficial. And just, you know, having Hormagaunts taking Space Marines to a 5-up save, all because of a Psychophage, that's very, very sweet. And it allows for the Psychophage to be a tanky trade unit. It did go up in points a little bit. It is now at 110 as opposed to 95 points, but all of these changes I'm 100% going to be taking for the Psychophage. Before, there was a pretty good argument that your opponent could just kind of either ignore or just go around the Psychophage, but the Psychophage's consistency in attacks and allowing it to support your other units and really allow for your melee army list to kind of function even stronger means that they kind of are forced to kill the Psychophage. So that can be something that you use to your advantage a lot of times. I spoke about it just briefly on the previous slide. I really don't think a 6-up Feel No Pain is worth it at all. That's the mainstay of this unit, and in my opinion, that's what it was before. It's really not a unit worth taking. But the changes that have been made make it a very, very strong consideration. When we are evaluating units that we want to put into our army list, I encourage you to step away from the thought of this unit can't be killed by anything. If the only reason why you're including a unit is because it's incredibly durable, and that's kind of all it does, odds are that unit is actually probably worse than you are making it out to be. There's a saying my buddy Kyle likes to say is you can't tank things to death. Meaning if your unit is just super, super durable and that's kind of all it does, it's not really going to be destroying your enemy's units. It's not going to really be doing super, super impactful things in the game besides just being somewhere. Like great on clean ones, you can often just out OC them on a point, and then they can't really do anything too much besides that. So that's why I think the Psychophage's relatively tanky profile doesn't really make it a good unit, but the fact that it now has a buff that adds value to your entire army, besides that 6-up Feel No Pain, it definitely encourages me to slot it into a list. In addition, with that buff that it gives with the extra AP, I've said this multiple times, the 6 attacks as opposed to a possible 2 attacks is a huge change to its damage output. And last but certainly not least, it definitely forces your opponent to dedicate actual units to kill it. I'm kind of going back on what I said at the beginning of this slide, but it is tanky enough where your opponent can't just send scouts into a Psychophage. I think a Psychophage now absolutely demolishes the scouts. It's very strong. So, 2 things. Don't just take something just because it's really, really hard to kill. And the second thing, take the Psychophage. He's really cool right now. It's YouTube channel commercial time. Subscribe to Wednesday Night Warhammer. Come on in. We do really cool things. Weekly battle reports, of course. We do weekly tactics videos just like this one. Not every single one is going to be celebrating the wonderful success of the Psychophage, but every single tactics video, I'm going to encourage you to play the game in a different way. I'm going to give you some information on how Tyranids function in a competitive sense, and hopefully you'll learn something. And last but certainly not least, we do weekly Tyranid Army list review shows. It's a way that I get to interact with the community, and the community gets to submit their new army list. Bounced out of slate, shook a whole bunch of things up. So if you're interested in sharing your spicy new brew, head on over to our channel and subscribe first, of course, and then look at our post section on our channel itself, and then you can copy and paste your list from whatever army builder you have there, and I will take a look at it as soon as I can. There's a lot of things you can do with the Psychophage, and I'm going to touch on a couple of them just to, maybe put some thoughts into how you can begin to include this model in your army list and try it out. It's only 110 points, so there might be a case where you can just slot it in by switching out a unit for a game or two. First up, we want to think about is maybe Assimilation Swarm, just full tilting, kind of sending into like a melee focused build. It could be the case, because being able to give, for instance, Tyrant Guard AP2 on their Bone Cleavers instead of just a measly AP1 seems very, very strong, as well as their big Lobster Claws, AP2 to AP3. I think that's a very huge breaking point as well. In addition, including things like Hormagaunts and Assimilation Storm seems really strong. And last but certainly not least, the Haruspex. Haruspex absolutely loves the Psychophage. He's going to get, 14 attacks with his mouth and tentacle stuff, and that's going to be AP2 after the Psychophage Flames. That's really, really tough because I feel like a lot of times just activating with AP1 into a unit is not very threatening, but pumping up to AP2 and then your big Lobster Claws to AP3 is super, super strong. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer that you include Psychophages in Assimilation Swarm. However, maybe you bring that mandatory 2 up to a mandatory 3, and maybe you start running 1 or 2 more melee units instead of slotting in that optional shooting that Assimilation Swarm often takes. Another neat idea that I think is really good with the Psychophage is just bringing it in from strategic reserves. It does move 12 inches now, so it is probably going to be able to get wherever it wants to get. However, just before you are going to charge or activate into something, you could just bring the Psychophage off from strategic reserves, maybe in an annoying point where your opponent has to deal with him. It flames a unit that your Gene Stealers or something are going to charge, and then your Gene Stealers or whatever get to activate at AP3, AP2 now. So it could be a pretty good unit just to have as a flexible strategic reserves unit. When I'm building lists, I often like to think of one or two units that I am almost always going to put into strat reserves. Maybe the Psychophage slots into that spot. Could be pretty good. You can use your Psychophage as a really early trade piece. You can bring him out to a center objective or something, just tow him on, and then have like your counter punch unit directly behind the Psychophage. So if anybody comes out and messes with the Psychophage, then they're going to get a lot of hurting from a big old horror specs. Because this trade unit is oftentimes almost better than a Lictor. It depends on the army. If you're playing against a melee army, I think the Psychophage is probably better than the Lictor. Yes, the Lictor is going to fight first and everything. However, the opponent is going to have to get up in your Psychophage's face in order to kill it. And then that's going to provide for a very good opportunity for your Gene Stealers or your new Raveners or Horror Specs to bounce back and hit the Psychophage, because it actually takes quite a bit to remove the Psychophage off of the field. I've mentioned this a couple times already, but if we just think about units that really love acting alongside the Psychophage, it was all of them that want to be in combat. Hormagaunts, the new Raveners, twin linked at AP3, damage 2. Whew, that's very, very strong. And then we talked about Harspexes with all of their numerous and flexible attacks. Seems really strong. And then Gene Stealers, of course, AP3 is going to be a really, really strong place, especially with Knights coming into play. So being able to get them on a 6-up save instead of a 5-up is very, very good. All of this is just really allowing for the Psychophage to be a tanky, trade, and support unit that is going to help all of your punchy bugs punch a little harder. Wrapping up the video, I have 2 lists that I suggest you try and run. If you're excited about the Psychophage, the next 2 lists are going to be really good at highlighting it in a different way for each of these lists. First one is kind of very specific. We're in a simulation swarm, and we've got the Hungry Hippo Hoedown. It's going to be triple Horror Specs, triple Psychophage. They're both Hippo-ish. But let's take a look. We've got Hive Tyrant with Instinctive Defense. I think it's just a phenomenal combo. And he's going to be running both the Bone Sword and the Scything Talons. Then we have the Neuro Tyrant with Biophagic Flow. It's just going to be a really good support base, floating around the battlefield and making sure that all of your Harvester units regenerate when they need to. And then I'm so excited to begin including these units, the hyper adapted Raveners. They are going to have parasitic biomorphology attached to them. That means their base going to be hitting at strength 7, the potential to have +1 attack to everybody in the unit. It's crazy, right? It's crazy, crazy, crazy. Battle line, we're going to have 1 Gargoyle squad, and we're going to have 1 Hormagaunt squad. And in our other data sheets, we're going to have a Biovore, those 3 Horror Spexes like we were talking about, double Lictor, triple Psychophage, like we said before, a 3-man Pyrovore and a 2-man Pyrovore, and then we have the squad of regular Raveners that will be attaching most of the time to the hyper-adaptive Raveners, and then last but not least, we will have a 6-man Tyrant card. So this list is kind of going full send into a melee lean, and I think Assimilation Swarm actually has the potential to do this because they can just dominate the center of the board, really force your opponent to come out and activate into some really, really durable units like Harspexes and Psychophages, and just kind of cause problems for your opponent. So I would be interested in playing this list. I'm hoping I need to actually get another Psychophage, maybe another Harspex too. But I might be running this list sometime soon. And if you have any ideas with a list similar to this, put them down in the comments below, and I'd be interested to see it. Last but certainly not least, we have an Invasion Fleet list that is leaning a little bit more towards the melee side in order to allow for this really cool support piece of the Psychophage to kind of show its colors. So let's take a look at it. In our characters, we have a Hive Tyrant with a Adaptive Biology. Again, I'm probably running full melee on that guy just because that's kind of how I like to run my Hive Tyrants for right now. Neuro Tyrant, because he works very well in Invasion Fleet with all the Synapse buffs. Broodlord with Perfectly Adapted, just because I had 15 extra points at the end. And then Hyper Adapted Raveners. I'm really excited to be slotting these guys in. And it feels weird putting them in the character section, but that's what they are. And I'm really excited to kind of see what different combos we can do with the Hyper Adapted Raveners. They're a really good unit that you kind of almost want to see if you can take lethals more than sustain with, because Hyper Adapted Raveners with lethal and sustain seems very, very strong. In our battle line, we have 2 squads of gargoyles. My name's Jordan, and I like putting 2 squads of gargoyles in almost every single list that I run. Sorry, they're very, very good. They regrow an invasion fleet, and they can block primary, score a bunch of secondaries, and just make your game run a little bit smoother. In our other data sheets, we have a Biovore, 2 Exocrines, Gene Stealers for additional melee punch, 2 Lictors, the Psychophage that we're talking about, Raveners to join or maybe not join the Hyper Adapted Raveners. You can decide that right before the game starts, which is really, really, really good effect. And then last but not least, 2 Rupture Cannon Tyrannifexes to shore up any anti-tank problems. I really like this list. I really like the idea of the Psychophage just slotting in there. You can play them in a couple of different roles. One, you can just bring them in as a strategic reserves support unit, like we talked about, flaming something, and then maybe your Raveners are going to be able to activate into that next. AP3 Twin-Linked Ravener seems very disgusting. It seems very, very good. Or you can kind of take the spot of where I was running a Maleceptor for a really long time. You can have him just be a center objective kind of bully just for a turn or two. He's not going to be as durable with the Maleceptor, of course. However, he is not going to be making you spend your CP every single turn like the Maleceptor was on that 5-up Field of Pain. With the changes to the Hive Tyrant, I think that's actually a worthy thought and a worthy include of this Psychophage. Let me know what you think about this list in the comments below. I think this has potential to be pretty strong, and I like the looks of it. All right, everybody, that is it for this week's video celebrating the successes of the Psychophage. Congrats to this guy. He seems really, really good right now. I apologize if my voice was a little bit scratchier than normal. I'm still recovering from a cold that I feel like I've had for months now. So I'm sorry if it's not silky smooth as usual. Regardless, I really appreciate you listening and hanging out with me while I talk about our new favorite bug friend. Have a great rest of your day, and comment the word, I really should think about this before. Comment chess clock before you go. All right, bye everybody. Like, comment, subscribe. Bye.